Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. So, along with the Netherlands, the UK took part in the elections for the European Parliament yesterday. As someone very astutely pointed out on the channel, a great example of the sovereignty of member states. Were everyone really controlled by unelected bureaucrats, we'd all be having them on the same day. But no, not only the day, but the specific form of proportional representation is decided by individual nations. And not just that, but the rules for registering for those elections is also down to individual nations, something that has caused a major problem here in the UK. This was an event that was already going to be highly polarised, but was conducted in a way that has meant up to 2 million eligible people being denied a vote. I'd already talked about the many UK citizens living abroad who'd be denied a vote because their postal votes were sent out too late for them to fill in and send back. A clear 2 weeks at least was needed, and people were receiving them just a day or two beforehand. But yesterday was an even more shameful situation. Non-UK EU residents of the UK were being turned away from polling stations. So the people who have been denied fall into the following categories. Firstly, now there was a change in the rules in the UK, and I'm not sure when they came in, which means that non-UK EU residents need to fill in 2 forms to vote. The normal one that we all fill in, and then another one that councils send to you afterwards. Some people had not filled in this form because it hadn't been sent to them. Now, on the face of it, it looks like the issue is that the deadline for returning this second form was the same day that the government announced that they'd be taking part in these elections. So, unless you knew about this form and demanded one from your councils ages ago, and let's face it, no one's been telling people about this form, there's no way you'd have been able to complete it. Now, I have to say that I'd see the existence of the form as a deliberate act to prevent people voting. Bear in mind that some countries don't even require a single form. You're just assumed to be wanting to vote. You're automatically registered if you're a resident there. And we didn't used to require 2. That changed, and it's clear that people were not informed about the change. And given that councils were sending these forms out to registered voters, only the most informed people would know they even needed one. Also bear in mind that this is likely to hit first-time voters, in other words, young people who are especially pro-European. The second category of person denied are the people who had properly registered, including filling out both forms, had received their polling card telling them they're good to go, but they were not good to go. Their names have been physically crossed off the voting register. These are people who've gone to the polling station and actually not just been told that they can't vote, but been told to go and vote in their own country. Absolutely appalling. These are ones who've completed all the required steps to vote, even the ones they weren't told about, but they knew, and they were still denied. And then, of course, the third group of people were the UK citizens resident in other countries that I'd already talked about that were given the postal votes too late. Now, each individual circumstance, you could look at it and put it down to incompetence, but looking at it as a whole, and you could see that these are groups of people who are likely to be voting for very pro-European parties. And it's a huge number as well. 2 million would be a significant proportion of the voting public if we had 100% turnout. But with the much lower numbers that we usually get in these sort of elections, it became a much larger proportion. Only an idiot would say that these votes wouldn't have changed the political landscape of the MEPs that we have just effectively elected. Based on usual participation numbers, it could literally be 1 in 5 voters was told to piss off. Now that's the upper limit and probably won't be quite that many, but even half of that would of course affect the results. It also brings to mind another irony in this Brexit fiasco. Isn't it odd how Brexiteers keep claiming injustice in the very areas that they themselves are inflicting harm? They keep saying that the media is biased against them, but it is biased in favour of them. The BBC, for example, recently refusing to screen a programme that featured the leader of Change UK because, well, it's not appropriate to feature political leaders on their channel during an election campaign, but had Nigel Farage on it twice in the same week. These groups who incite violent action against both politicians and minority groups, which have resulted in physical attacks, the murder of an MP and the attempted murder of another. Yet someone chucks a milkshake over them and apparently it's an outrage. Now, don't get me wrong, I think it is. It's not funny, and it's actually hurt the Remain side. For years, our side never carried out any attacks or threats of attacks. It was entirely one-sided. Now that's been shattered. But still, to have Nigel Farage, the guy who said he'd personally take to the streets in armed conflict, on British streets he'd go out with a gun, he said, if Brexit wasn't delivered, was found hiding in his bus this week, shaking like a shitting dog because he saw a couple of youths with a milkshake. They also talk about Brexit, stealing democracy. And yet here we have a situation where democratic rights have actually been stolen from 2 million people. They'll not be expressing outrage over that, will they? But that too is an outrage, and the government surely will be taken to court over it. There are lots of groups who would have the motivation for doing so. The groups of people who were illegally disenfranchised will be able to. The political parties who will have lost out have every right to as well. The European Commission should definitely be taking a look at this. At this moment in time, I have to say that I've not been able to find a definite statement from them, but I did tweet asking, and someone did say that the European Commission have tweeted out a form that people can fill in if they have any issues with the electoral process. But this whole process is unacceptable on every level, and a decent democracy would overturn the result and do it properly. And I'm not just saying that as a theoretical thing. This actually does happen. There are countries where something like this happens. They wouldn't void the result and it would be run again. I saw someone on Twitter suggesting that it was a deliberate ploy by the government to make sure the results would be invalid so that we'd be kicked out of the EU. That doesn't hold water in my view. I do think it's a deliberate ploy. The thing is that most of this was carried out by councils, not central government. Now, there is a particular polling company that links an awful lot of these councils. But still, for collusion on this scale, I just think of the sheer number of people who would need to be involved. As a mathematician, I was interested in an article a while ago that showed an Oxford physicist deriving an equation that links all the factors involved in a conspiracy and the chances of it being revealed, whether deliberately by a whistleblower or by accident. Now, although the chances, of course, are going to increase with time, and there hasn't been much time for this alleged conspiracy, just the number who would have to be involved and complicit doesn't really make sense without someone saying, oh, by the way, this dodgy thing happened. When it comes to local councils, never confuse their incompetence for collusion. But what central government did decide was that a second form would be needed to be filled out by residents who were not UK citizens, when it could just as easily have been on the main form. How hard is it on the main form to have a section that asks you if you're a citizen of another country, and if so, do you intend to vote here or in your country of origin? Because that's all the second form is. They could have put that on the first form. I mean, apart from anything else, most people surely choose to vote where they are resident anyway. That's where it matters most. If the government really wanted to ask that question, wouldn't it make more sense to ask the people who are UK citizens living outside the UK? It was also the government that decided to announce the elections on the deadline day for that second registration form, knowing that many councils then wouldn't send the form and that they wouldn't have sent it beforehand, because why go to the expense if the government keeps saying we're not actually going to have those elections? Besides, if the EU Commission find that our elections were invalid, which they bloody well should, we'll just be told to run them again properly. Yes, we can't do it now before the new parliament is due to sit. But remember, the whole thing about committing to the European elections was to make sure we committed to them. There were already a plan in place for us to keep our current MEPs if we were still in the EU when the new parliament sat anyway. They would just bring those plans forward again, but say that we still have to resit those elections. So we'll just have to keep the current MEPs. It would be no basis for kicking us out of the EU. Just another black mark against our name as a country already seen around the world as being utterly incapable of even carrying out the simplest administrative tasks. So I can certainly believe that government have had a hand in this, a deliberate hand in this, for whatever end. It's too much to believe that no one has directed it. But the fallout could be very, very serious. At the very least, the result does need to be voided, preferably in British courts, but at least in the European court. But then what? The Brexiteers, who will definitely clean up on the current results, will then cry foul. They've already shown that they will tear this country apart. Indeed, many want to do just that. That is their whole intention. They could end up riling up even more support over this. Remember, they didn't stand for election because they want to be MEPs. Maybe Farage. They stood to cause as much trouble as possible. So this has the potential to be a very explosive flashpoint in our Brexit-themed self-destruction. So those are my thoughts on the issue. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, and until next time, I'll see you later.